His rocket experienced a malfunction on takeoff, and that proved fatal on Saturday. He was quite a daredevil. This is a short news clip about this event.
64-year-old Mad Mike Hughes was known as a homemade astronaut on a self-financed mission to space. But as Mola Lenghi reports, he died living out his dream.
Moments after launching, a homemade rocket crashed into the open desert in California Saturday. On board, Mike Hughes. It would be the final act of the self-styled daredevil known as Mad Mike. His mission was to fly to the edge of outer space to ultimately see whether the Earth is flat.
I'm the best hope to prove the flat Earth.
Mad Mike spoke to CBS Sunday Morning in 2018, just a few months after the successful launch of his first steam-powered rocket, built from spare parts in his garage.
Easy, guys, easy.
He walked away and vowed to fly again.
The flat Earth thing is like everything else to me. I just want people to question everything.
Mr. Hughes was quite an inspiration and will be sorely missed. In the spirit of questioning everything, I decided to make this video because I captured the interesting aerial phenomena the day that Mr. Hughes perished in his rocket. So, in his honor, enjoy this awesome presentation. Beautiful clouds are lenticular clouds, but I begin to wonder if there might not be more to the story.
Ahí se van a ver vientos. Y van a una velocidad, pero 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 en la pantalla.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at this thing. It's rotating.
The UFO phenomena is quite fascinating to a lot of people. I got interested in '93 when the United States Air Force released quite a shocking encounter with these types of bell-shaped flying saucers captured from the Nazis. This particular photo, along with another one that appeared on Art Bell, were taken during a geology trip in Arizona, around Yuma, and a lot of people witnessed this craft that the U.S. military was testing. Since then, these are the most common saucers that have been declassified. Shortly after the breakup of the Soviet Union, in the summer of 1993, I was driving over to my grandparents and listening to the radio when they mentioned that recently declassified UFO encounter was going to be shown on primetime news. So I remember turning on the TV and I was blown away. Super clear, you know, not fuzzy video clip in full color showing this type of flying saucers coming from behind and flying along a group of jets. It was just incredible. In the 90s, I had the privilege of working on an intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platform, or ISR platform. And it was quite interesting. I remember after I got my clearance and walked aboard when all the electronics were on, it was quite exhilarating. If you didn't have a clearance, you could still go on board when everything was shut off. And anyway, it appears they've modernized the electronics. I remember one night, I drove to a nearby university, and I was driving back. It was January, very cold outside. Driving back around midnight, and way in the distance I could see the light from this aircraft. We would fly those around while testing the electronics. It was a clear night, lots of stars, and suddenly I saw a shooting star just boom, really quick, falling right towards the airport, and it hovered. All of a sudden it stopped and hovered around the aircraft, and then after a few seconds it shot back up into the night sky and became a dot. And that was just a stunning, that was the first UFO that I encountered. And later I talked to one of my friends at work, and he told me he had seen the same thing. Anyway, that was almost 30 years ago. My career just got more and more interesting from there. I believe that disclosure of flying saucers and this advanced propulsion and technology is imminent. Some information has leaked out since the breakup of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, but more needs to be released. Now, this following footage is quite fascinating. It was obtained from the KGB. I remember seeing it on one of the cable channels, and it was narrated by Roger Moore, if I remember correctly, one of the James Bond actors. Have a look at this. In the U.S. National Archives catalog, there's an interesting document, Project 1794 Final Development Summary Report. And they disclose some drawings of a flying saucer that they were working on. Notice in the center, it's a compartment for a person. Now, what we saw in Russia was a slightly modified version, not quite the same. So, you know, these designs evolve over time. But, yeah, there's an interesting resemblance there of, you know, the same object. Another similar design by the Avro Corporation has been declassified for some time. These flying saucers, you know, have been disclosed because they're not all that exciting or fascinating. Nothing, you know, earth-shattering. But there's a class of flying saucers that uses different propulsion technology, and they're still holding on to that. Now, if you want to see this Avro saucer, you can go to the National Air Force Museum and look at it and take pictures. It's a beautiful thing, quite exciting when you're looking at it, but in terms of the physics, not all that exciting. Before we get back to the lenticular clouds I filmed, here's a clip from MSNBC that indicates things are going to be, you know, disclosed pretty soon. Let's listen to an ex-military intelligence officer talk about his experience.
The man who ran that secret program now says the existence of UFOs have been proved beyond reasonable doubt. He joins me now. Luis Elizondo, thank you for joining us. Tell me why you ended up working for a program that the Pentagon didn't even want to admit existed. It was the Defense Department's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. It wasn't UFO hunters. You were looking for explanations to things that were unexplained.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Velshi. We basically were brought into the program initially to identify and try to figure out some of these phenomena that were flying around our military aircraft and our locations, and basically try to collect enough data where we could make some positive analysis and identify what these things were.
The things that have been reported are that it was $22 million spent over a few years. It was people like you who had other jobs in the military but sort of came together to try and figure these things out, and that there were facilities that were leased and built to hold things that were found. What can you tell me? What can you tell me about what this program did?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, just so your viewers understand, I still hold a security clearance. Sure. So there are certain things I unfortunately will not be able to talk about. And because I'm no longer employed with the U.S. government, you're going to have to bring up some of these questions with the U.S. government directly. But I can tell you from our perspective, since 2008, we collected a lot of information. Frankly, it wasn't just eyewitness testimony. It also included signature data from radar, video as well. It also included other eyewitness testimony from radar operators that were on scene, air traffic controllers. And so basically we put all this information together to try to identify if we could a signature, basically something that gave us a common picture of what we were looking at. And in many cases, we weren't able to find what that was. So it didn't match any signature of an aircraft or a drone or a missile or anything else from a DoD or Department of Defense perspective that we would normally be looking for.
Yeah, unfortunately, he cannot tell us everything. If you want to learn more, the History Channel has put together an excellent documentary on these sightings of the Gulf of California by the U.S. Navy during an exercise. And they interviewed the pilot, and quite fascinating. But Let's get back to the lenticular clouds and see what's going on there. Lenticular cloud formations are somewhat rare occurrences. However, when they do occur, they tend to grab our attention because obviously they tend to resemble flying saucers. The typical explanation in terms of weather and dew point, etc., are correct, but there is a hidden reality to some of this phenomena in terms of electromagnetics. Now here's another phenomena that can cause what appears to be a lenticular cloud. Now let's watch this in slow motion. Notice how the cloud moves with the aircraft. It's gone supersonic, and that's the shock wave boundary. What I find fascinating is that the cloud moves with the aircraft rapidly. And also it appears to be a parabola, not a cone. In the wake of the shock wave. Quite fascinating. But nothing compares with what I found out in the 90s while playing with the highly sensitive levitating toy known as the Levitron. After more than 2 decades, I took out these toys of mine that I bought way back in the 90s. Pretty cool stuff. The Levitron is amazing, but it can be quite frustrating to start. As you observed, it's quite frustrating to start. Now, there is some washers that one has to adjust on top to get the weight just right. It's a powerful neodymium magnet that's being repelled by the magnetic base, and it's really stabilized by its spin. Gyroscopically stabilized. Now, the wedges for the magnetic base have to be adjusted as well so that it is perfectly vertical. Lots of things to adjust, and it can be a really frustrating experience. It makes you pull your hair out. But the fact that it's sensitive is why I discovered this phenomena back in the 90s. I was playing with a Levitron one afternoon, and I had perfected the technique. I had the base perfectly level, and it would stay up for about, a minute to 2 minutes easily. And I remember I just started it, and it was spinning really good, fast, stable. It wasn't wobbly. It went up. And all of a sudden, there was a downpour. It was cloudy outside, and I guess it started to rain, like really heavy, just whoosh. All of a sudden, I heard the heavy rain against the roof. And as soon as I heard the rain, the Levitron dropped. straight down. It reacted so quick, and it was correlated with the rain. I thought, I wonder what's going on. Well, I went and I thought, okay, maybe it just dropped. Who knows what happened? I tried to start it and spun it, and it would not lift off. I started taking weights off of it, all those washers. I took all the washers off, and the thing would not lift. I was just blown away. There was a correlation between the storm that just came over the house and the magnetic strength of these magnets. And sure enough, after the storm passed, the strength of the magnet resumed. And I put back the same number of washers as before, and it worked just fine. Because of that experience, I started to realize there is a bigger reality. So this levitron can also be instrumented with lasers and photodiodes so that its movements and its bobbing up and down can be measured. And it is a very sensitive instrument that can pick up electromagnetic disturbances in the ether or space-time that are constantly flowing and ebbing across the surface of this world. And that was an eye-opener for me. I had been studying gravitational anomalies since the 80s when my physics professor told me about this gravity hill outside of Sonoma State in Northern California. And I started visiting some of these places and doing experiments. I visited over 5 different sites, and there's many more out there. There's some on the East Coast as well. And these locations where gravity is disturbed, it's really the place to understand curved space-time and the deeper things of our reality. However, we'll leave that for part 2. So make sure you subscribe, folks, and thanks again for watching. Stay curious, my friends.